Thank you so much. An honor to be with you all. My name's Gabriel Gold. This is Sam Jackson. And thank you to Eva for having us, inviting us to this beautiful gathering. A lot of the music for me is inspired by my relationship to glaciers in the Arctic. I've spent a lot of time in Iceland, and I've been working on a number of projects involving sound and the ice caps. And it's really a pleasure to bring some of that spirit here today. So again, thank you so much. If you'd like to keep in touch, just please find us. We'll be in and around the summit. And again, thank you so much. I'm Gabriel Gold. This is Sam Jackson.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Grounded Summit, Day 2. I'm Liam Maitland, your MC. Is everyone having a good time so far? I think yesterday we solved half the world's problems. We're going to solve the other half today. We have an incredible day of panels, great food ahead, great conversations to be had. Without further ado, I want to introduce you one more time to our founder. Please give an enormous Grounded Summit welcome to Julia Jackson and JJ. Coming up here, Julia!
welcome to day 2 of Grounded. I want to quickly acknowledge all the incredible speakers yesterday. There will be people trickling in. I also wanted to quickly acknowledge our amazing culinary team, Soren, everyone involved. They're back preparing, but I'm greatly looking forward to the topics that we'll explore today, and I know you will all be moved so that we can talk less and do more. To begin the day, I'm thrilled to share a quick video with you that Grounded co-executive produced with the Years Project. To share a little bit more, please welcome on the stage my right hand who's helped make this event seamless, my Chief Operating Officer, JJ Osmond.
Thank you. Thank you. Over the last 10 months, the Grounded team has been working incredibly hard to create this visionary summit, and I'd like to thank you all for being a part of it. In addition, Julia and I have had the pleasure to work with the Years Project, an Emmy Award-winning team, to create a mini-series focused on climate change solutions. Many of us know the precipice that we stand upon, and it's important to reflect on the fact that our next steps can change that trajectory. In the video that you are about to see, we explore some of the immediate, tangible steps to address the crisis that we face and sequester atmospheric carbon. John Wick from the Marin Carbon Project came upon potentially one of the single strongest solutions to climate change. You heard from his amazing colleague, Calla Rose Ostrander, yesterday. John has discovered a simple yet potent way to store more carbon more efficiently in the ground. We can lower temperature of the planet while simultaneously increasing the health of our soils. Strategic behaviors like this create win-win situations within the context of solutions to climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the first showing of episode 1 of the Best Case series. Thank you.
What if one of the biggest contributors to climate change could be turned into one of the most powerful solutions? This man was just trying to get rid of the weeds on his ranch when he stumbled upon a way to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. In 1998, John Wick and his wife moved from San Francisco to a ranch in Northern California. But right away, there were problems. Cows from a neighboring ranch were roaming freely and destroying his land.
So the first order of business was to get rid of the cows. Once we got rid of the cows, we thought we were done and that things would become easy for us.
It didn't work out that way. Once the cows were gone, the ground dried out and weeds invaded the land.
So I took it seriously, and we had 20 men come and we pulled every weed on the ranch. And it got worse. The next year, more weeds came. 10,000 weeds came where every one weed had been.
A rangeland ecologist told John he needed to bring back the cows to combat the weeds, but the cows had to be used in just the right way. The cattle had to be moved constantly from one plot of land to another. That's because if cows stay in one place too long, they eat everything on the ground and destroy the soil.
So the first year, we brought in 250 cows and we moved them across the ranch, just the right amount for them and for the grass. And it worked.
By the next summer, the land had completely repaired itself. The grass had deep roots and the soil was holding a ton of water. That's when the ecologist had a light bulb moment. What if the land was doing even more? What if all that healthy grass was helping to solve climate change by sucking CO2 out of the air and storing it safely underground? If it was, it would be a major climate breakthrough. John brought in more scientists to conduct soil tests on dozens of ranches in the area to find out.
And we found something that was very exciting. It was exciting even to the scientists. We found that where they had sprayed cow manure on top of the grass, those ranches actually had more carbon in the soil. Nobody expected that to happen.
Dairy farms were storing the most carbon in the soil. Those farms had been sprayed with large amounts of manure, But that manure had a big downside. Manure produces some of the most powerful greenhouse gases on Earth. So John wanted to find something that was as effective as manure, but wouldn't heat the planet.
So we decided to try putting compost on top of the ground to see if we could see the same thing happen.
A few months later, John checked to see if it had worked.
Where we had put compost, we had a significant amount of grass. It was 50% more grass, and it was beautiful.
More importantly, the soil was storing vast amounts of carbon. And over the next few years, John's one application of compost caused the land to store more and more carbon. In fact, it turned out that just one dusting of compost would increase that storage for decades to come.
We were really excited about the results that we saw on my ranch. But in order for this to be meaningful, we needed to go take it to other bigger ranches, which is what we did at Stemple Creek with Lauren.
When I first heard about applying compost to the land, I was kind of skeptical. Didn't really know that much about it, but figured it's a good opportunity to learn.
Spreading compost on his land produced such incredible results. Lauren now makes his own compost, a mixture of tree shavings and grapeseed oil. His land has been transformed.
When we first started applying compost to the land, it felt really, really good to see. You could actually visually see the results. The grass was greener, and deeper, and more lush, and it created a lot more biodiversity in the soil and the plant life, and it just felt good. And you could actually look at it and say, man, we were really making a difference by using this practice and building the soil this way. So the compost we're applying now is going to be sequestering carbon for the next 30 years, which is pretty epic that we can create that kind of change.
And we need that kind of change because agriculture is responsible for 1/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions, and that number is growing. That's why in 2008, John co-founded the Marin Carbon Project to spread the idea of carbon farming to as many ranches and farms as possible.
We can lower the temperature of the planet right now by increasing how healthy our soils are.
What started with John's determination to get rid of weeds is now a blueprint for a revolution in agriculture and a way for farmers to help solve climate change, not make it worse.
This version of agriculture actually is a climate solution.
But if John's vision is going to have a global impact, it needs to be adopted by farms and ranches everywhere because it could be as powerful a solution as wind, solar, or EVs in meeting the biggest challenge of our time.
All right, thank you so very much to the Years Project, One Rancher's Solution for Climate Change. And that brings us now to our first panel of the morning on innovative solutions. Your moderator, Jody Manning. Come on up here, Jody.
Good morning, everyone. How are you today? Very good. My name is Jody Manning. I am the Director of Marketing for Cool Effect. Cool Effect is here to help fight carbon emissions. Our story began some time ago, many, many years ago, actually, in rural Honduras. And it's the story of our founders, Richard and Dee Lawrence, and their family. I'm going to let you have them tell you about it.
Tegucigalpa is one of the oldest cities in this hemisphere. It's also one of the poorest. Hurricane Mitch left its mark on the city's long history of suffering.
It was a terrible hurricane that came and sat over the country of Honduras in Central America and sat there for a week. And it basically wiped out the bridges, the roads, the infrastructure of the country.
15 years ago, Richard Lawrence and his family first traveled to Honduras to aid in the recovery effort after Hurricane Mitch. Then 2 years later, a 14-year-old Sky Lawrence made a connection between respiratory illness in many of the children and the unhealthy conditions in their homes due to a lack of proper ventilation. So the Lawrences figured out how to build a better stove. Over 100,000 stoves later, Mirador, the company they founded, is gold standard certified and has improved children's health while creating cleaner and better conditions for thousands of families. And today, the Honduras project's successful impact is sparking a larger idea.
Project Mirador in Honduras was really a catalyst for seeing a problem and seeing what could be done in the world.
We're launching the Cool Effect and trying to provide people a platform where they can come together and they can take small action by supporting projects that verifiably reduce carbon emissions, and together we can have a big impact.
We feel it's better to just take one small action and a hope that it'll catch on. It's better to light a single candle than it is to sit and curse the dark.
And our hope is, with the Cool Effect, that we're just creating a platform that the world has been waiting for. And as my colleague says, Earth, we're here.
So as you can see, technology and human ingenuity run very, very deep in our DNA. The efficient stove that the Lawrences developed uses rocket elbow technology, which helps improve both conduction as well as ventilation. The new stove was such a success that they quickly needed a way to manage the growth. So what they did is they deployed Salesforce technology. Not only did it help manage the maintenance, but it helped them capture the data that was necessary to qualify for carbon credits. And in doing so, the science behind the stoves just got better and better and better, and more carbon was reduced. Now, 15 years later, Project Mirador has built over 180,000 stoves all across Honduras and has prevented over 1 million tons of CO2, and it has created 172 local jobs. As a result, Project Mirador became a catalyst for change. The Lawrences knew that if the project improved because of carbon financing, there were other projects out there doing the hard work every single day that also needed a voice and could also benefit from carbon financing. So, December 2015, who knows what that was? COP21, right? Well, we had an idea. We had literally 3 web pages and a whole lot of energy. And we got on a plane and we went to Paris. We wanted to see if consumers, individuals, would actually take a simple action to reduce 1 ton of CO2. And guess what? It worked. In the 3 minutes that Sky Lawrence was on stage and announced the idea behind Cool Effect, we reduced 257 tons of harmful CO2. We were quickly labeled crowdfunding for climate change. Now, as a creative director, I'm not really sure I liked that, but people really did understand it. So what happened after that is we came back and a 3-year mission started. Yesterday, we talked a lot about communication. Well, we were very focused on getting Americans to take action. So what we wanted to do was conquer our own backyard first. And that started an entire 3-year journey of testing and learning and failing. We worked on message strategies. Communication was just huge for us. But what we found out along this process is even though 145 million Americans are alarmed or concerned about climate change, that doesn't mean they want to open their wallet and buy a ton of carbon. So we needed a whole new approach to the conversation. Cool Effect became education first. Such things as what is a ton? How is a TON different from a TONNE, for example? These were the types of questions that we were getting. We also had to relay it into something that started a conversation as opposed to shut it down, because many times conversations about climate change are very overwhelming to the average person. So we needed a new approach. And instead of supporting a project, which is where we started and very much still what we do, we decided to begin to fight an enemy.
Every day, in nearly everything we do, we are producing the carbon dioxide that leads to climate change. The effects of climate change are familiar, but the actual cause, carbon pollution, is invisible to us. Cool Effect is changing that. This is the FLIR camera. It's what makes seeing carbon dioxide possible. While technology makes it possible for us to see the problem, it's up to all of us to work towards a solution. Through organizations like Cool Effect, carbon-reducing projects are already underway. Projects like wind turbines being built in communities that otherwise could never support them. Preventing thousands of acres of deforestation. Building biogas digesters to provide households with clean energy. Every person has the power to make a difference. With Cool Effect, carbon pollution can't hide anymore.
So I'm happy to tell you, 4 years later, we've reduced 690,000 tons of carbon pollution, and we're just getting started. Our community is over 500,000 strong, and I hope that each of you will do everything that you can to reduce as much as possible, and then consider supporting a project to neutralize the rest. So like the butterfly effect and the ripple effect before us, we are the Cool Effect, and we truly believe that small actions will create planet-sized change. Thank you so much. Brent? All right, and the rest of the panel is coming up. Brent, I believe you're going to be next.
Okay. Imagine if we could restore the balance and the equilibrium to Earth's carbon cycle. You know, I always start out my carbonate sedimentology course at Stanford trying to teach the students that it's one thing to have a qualitative understanding of what we're all trying to accomplish or what we're studying, but then if you also get a quantitative understanding, you have a whole new appreciation. I'm going to ask you in the next 5 minutes to actually pay attention very closely to the numbers I'm going to be talking about. You know, and I know for most of us, it's like me when I hear about the national deficit. There are these huge numbers, and I have no connection to them. So, and a lot of these carbon numbers are that way. And I'm going to ask you not to do that. I'm going to ask you to listen specifically to the numbers. And I'm going to use a couple of terms. I'm going to talk about 1 billion tons, and that's a gigaton. And I'm going to talk about 1 million tons as a megaton. And there's 1,000 millions and a billion. So when I say 1 billion tons, I'm talking about something that has 1,000, 1 million ton quantities in it. And the first thing I want to mention is, where do you guys think the carbon is? So in this envelope that surrounds the planet, all this gas swirling above our heads, it's 82,000 miles thick around the whole globe. It has about 750 gigatons, or 750 billion tons of CO2. And then if we talk about the biosphere, all the living plankton in the ocean and the rainforests and all the dead tissue and plant tissue in the soils, there's about 2,500 gigatons. Okay, so about 3 times as much as there is in the atmosphere. And in the whole hydrosphere of the Earth, all the lakes, rivers, ice caps, oceans, there's about 40,000 gigatons. So there's a lot in the ocean. But how much do you think there is in the lithosphere, in the crust of the Earth? You know, the White Cliffs of Dover, the Great Barrier Reef, you know. there's about 75 million gigatons. So essentially all the carbon on Earth is sitting in limestone. It's not even in the oceans or the biosphere. It's almost immeasurable on a global basis in what's in the atmosphere. We all know we need to remove carbon, and what we're doing is we're mineralizing it, just like the Earth does naturally. So all the times in the history of the Earth 100 million years ago, when we know carbon dioxide was 7 times higher, that's also when all the great limestone deposits were made, because there's so much carbon around. They made limestone out of it. That's what happens. And that's what we're doing. And what's different about mineralizing carbon is it's permanent. So we talk a lot about what's the half-life of CO2, meaning how long have you kept the CO2 out of the atmosphere? There's a lot of methods that'll take it out of the atmosphere, but then put it back the next year for a net neutral. And it's actually too late to do that kind of thing. Right now, we have to do what we need carbon negative technologies that actually are going to pull it out of the atmosphere and keep it out of the atmosphere. And so when we talk about the half-life of carbon in mineralization, it's essentially 1 billion years. It's there permanently. It's never coming out. And we use a process to mineralize it that we call geomimetic. It's like biomimetic, but instead of a biologic process, it's copying a geologic process. And if you've ever been in the tropics, like the Bahamas, and you've seen these white grains of sand, those are growing in place. And it's from the saturation of CO2 in the ocean. It's getting converted to carbonate and turning to limestone. We started doing this at a fairly large scale about 3 years ago at San Francisco International Airport. Their goal is to be the greenest airport in the world, and they're doing very well. So this is the boarding areas on Terminal 1, POR. And it's a carbon negative concrete. So if you land on Southwest, you're walking across our carbon negative concrete. And places like the city and county of San Francisco do interesting things. But here we're actually specified in the specs. So Turner Construction had to put out the bid, and Central Concrete won the bid, and Central Concrete had to come to Blue Planet to get the aggregate for their concrete because the airport wanted that. I put this up here to illustrate that the greatest power that governments have to mitigate CO2 isn't any kind of subsidy, tax, tariff, anything. It's their procurement power. And it doesn't cost them any more money. And that's what's so useful about procurement power is you don't have to be a rich country. Carbon taxes only work in Japan, North America, places where there are a bunch of rich people, right? But that's not where we need the help. We need it in the rest of the world. But in the whole world, people are mining rock, and they're paying for it, and the money's already there. How much rock is there? Well, globally, there's 55 gigatons of rock mined every year. So remember, a gigaton's a billion, okay? And we think humans put out 38 gigatons of CO2. So there's more rock mined every year than there is CO2 put out by humans. And it turns out limestone is calcium carbonate, which has a molecular weight of 100, and CO2 has a molecular weight of 44. So if I have a ton of limestone sitting here in front of me that we've made, I've got 440 kilograms of CO2 that's permanently in the structure of the crystal lattice, and it's never coming out. It's permanently sequestered. And all over the world, like the state of California, we're running out of aggregate. It's moving longer distances. There's a global sand shortage. The impact you can have on large projects is amazing. Think about the Hoover Dam. The San Francisco Bay Area puts up the equivalent of a Hoover Dam every year in terms of the amount of concrete it uses. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our process other than to say It's one of the only processes that's very low energy, doesn't consume water, doesn't consume much energy. It's had carbon life cycle analyses done on it. And I just want to finish showing you one specific example. This is a project we have in the San Francisco Bay Area close by, and this is the Air Quality District's goal in the black line of where they want us to go from a carbon point of view versus where we're actually going. Well, the impact of using the carbon sequestered aggregate in the Bay Area, where there's about 5 million yards of concrete poured every year, including the airport, is that we could sequester about 4 million tons without any taxes, spending any more money, charging more for it, anything. It's just the current infrastructure that's in place. So, and this could be a city in China, could be Buenos Aires, could be Cape Town, South Africa. You'll see the same dynamics. There are these rock quarries around the people, because moving rock is very heavy and carbon intensive. These are open pit mines. Almost all over the world, what we're finding is they're running out of rock. They're not opening up new mines. In the Bay Area, we bring a lot of our rock from British Columbia, about half of it. And about half of it is also in government projects. So people like the City and County of San Francisco can use the power of their pen to do climate mitigation. That's all they need. They just have to say, we want carbon negative concrete. And we've actually created a rating system called the Carbon Star system. It's patterned after Energy Star. And a specifier can specify a carbon neutral concrete, carbon negative concrete, just like they'd say it has to be 5,000 PSI compressive strength. And within the plant we're building, within a 25-mile radius, there's about 10 concrete ready-mix plants. Within a 50-mile radius, there's another 20. The point is, I could be in Moscow and the same infrastructure is in place already. So it's something you could do yesterday. There's no new pipelines or anything. And then I'll just finish saying that one of the most interesting things that has happened is at the plant in the Bay Area, for example, we use old concrete that's demolished as our calcium source. And so we bring in this stuff, and normally it would get landfilled, and we actually upcycle it and dissolve away the cement part, and we're left with rock that can be reused. So you don't need to bring more rock down from British Columbia or anywhere like that. The reason that's important, you talk about the circular economy. The most recycled material on the planet is concrete. It's the most common material. So if I ask you, what does the city of San Francisco weigh? And then I say, how much of that is concrete? It's about 90%. So there's a lot of concrete out there compared to aluminum cans, for example. And so it's just turned out to be a wonderful aspect of the circular economy. Thanks. Thank you.
Hey there. Thank you. So I'm Stephen Brumby. I'm with National Geographic Society. And I'm going to be talking about the innovative technology that we're trying to bring to understand what we need to do for the immediate and longer term. So let's see. Okay, good. And good, and the video's running. So at National Geographic Society, we have a lab that I lead called the Geographic Visualization Lab. And the point of the lab is to do the thing that National Geographic is sort of well known for, to engage people with the natural and cultural world by telling the story of the planet, okay? And not just the story for story's sake, though of course we all enjoy a good story, but a story to help move people to be engaged with the natural world and take action, okay? But you need to help them take informed action. So how can you bring the best data in the world together and present it in such a way that you can inform better decision making? And I'll just, for a second, like, why am I the person running the Geographic Visualization Lab? So I came to the United States 20 years ago to work on the space program. Had the opportunity to work on trying to map out all the planets and moons in the solar system. That's the thing that originally brought me here. Quickly got into looking at the Earth from space, and over a long career with the US government, basically built decision support systems to help US government agencies like the USDA and the Department of Energy and other folks to make big, large investment decisions. And then a few years ago, I actually spun my team out of Los Alamos to start a VC-backed startup called Descartes Labs, like René Descartes, I think therefore I am, that did the same thing, built fully automated decision support systems using space data to inform investment decisions by Wall Street. And Descartes Labs has been a big success. It hasn't enough. After only a couple of years, after the first year, we managed to beat the USDA for forecasting corn in the United States. And then we have an announced partnership with Cargill, which is good. And now I was able to, fortunately, step away from that and do the thing which I really wanted to do all along, which was take that sort of technology but apply it to conservation. So what we're building at National Geographic, and this is a teaser of something that we're going to be releasing a little bit later in the year, but and thank you to Julia for inviting me to come speak today. I wanted, especially with this fantastic audience and this fantastic workshop and summit that you've put together, I thought it's worth it to give you folks the teaser of what we're plotting. So Earth Pulse is a new digital platform that enables data-driven conservation, okay? And it's for senior decision makers. So my specialty is artificial intelligence applied to satellite imagery, and I've spent a long career playing with pixels collected from space, collected from all sorts of instruments all the way down to the ground. Everybody loves that stuff if you're on the technology side, but the folks who have to make conservation decisions, they haven't got time to play with pixels. Nobody really wants pixels. They want answers. And the question is, how can you really just bring the system together that allows you to produce those answers? So the sorts of dimensions that we're looking at with this Earth Pulse platform that we're going to release a little bit later this year is to understand the wildlife, so all the species that are out there that share our planet with us, and that we're in many cases here first, the ecosystems and the habitats that the species inhabit and that we also inhabit, the impact that human civilization is having on the species and the wildlife, and also on ourselves, okay, because we really are impacting ourselves with the way we live. And then the protected areas, the responses that people try and engineer to mitigate the worst of the impacts and think ahead to a future where, you know, the scientific community is sort of gelling around the idea of trying to protect 30% of the world's surface by 2030, leading up to protecting half of the world's surface, including the oceans, by 2050. This idea of nature needs half is like a key organizational idea on the side to preserve the Earth's biodiversity. And it can be aligned with the goals that are needed to keep us below the 2 degrees Celsius planetary threshold for carbon. But there are some real, interesting, legitimate discussions between the biodiversity community and the carbon sequestration community, or the carbon mitigation community, and there's this interesting things there. So having a platform that puts the best available science data out in a totally open and transparent way is necessary to help bring the whole world onto the same page about what we're doing. And then once people make plans, how do you follow what people are doing in a way that is not just self-reporting, which is one of the big issues. Okay, lots of people say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Do they really do it? And if you can show, if you are the owner of a protected area that you've set up somewhere, how do you show people the impact that you are having with your investments? How can you show people that you are doing what you said you were going to do, and thereby hopefully bring in others to help you leverage what you're doing and do more? So to achieve this vision of a Earth Pulse that measures the status and trends of the planet, we bring in data, and National Geographic is famous for having, and in fact, if you've looked at our stall over in the stables area in the core, you will have seen some of the devices that we actually have, the little robot that goes to the bottom of the ocean, the thing that runs around with tigers. the smart drones that can fly between the trees like something in a science fiction film. One of the smartest sensors we can put in the field is a human with a smart device, okay? And the smart devices are cheap enough now that it's globally accessible. But you need a way to bring all of that data together in a geospatial context. And so for that, we are actually building a system, and this is like a little teaser image of what we're building. Imagine for every single protected area in the world, whether it's a private area or a public area, it could be a formally protected area, like in this case, we're looking at the Okavango Delta, and in fact, the entire watershed for the Okavango. So the Okavango, mostly in Botswana, is the Okavango Delta is in Botswana, and it's the home of the last large wild population of elephant, to a scary degree. And this huge area, transnational region. Imagine for this region and every other protected area or conservation area around the world, you have a dashboard that's continuously updated with the world's best science data coming from NASA, coming in from European Space Agency, coming in from folks on the ground, right? The local communities and citizen explorers and scientists, as well as quantitative sensors distributed through the terrain. And all of these things are just feeding in continuously and producing a continuously updated state of health of that region, okay? For every region simultaneously. And then not just the sort of hard numbers, because some people like the quantitative numbers. You need those numbers if you're going to take that data and try and get a deal from World Bank Group or something to do some work there. But you also need to be able to tell stories about it, to explain the importance of those numbers, to bring in rich, emotionally engaging media and explain why people should care about this particular place. And so here's an example of bird migration work that we've been doing with the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology. And linking to a story that came out in the magazine back in March of last year. And so being able to bring all this together with storytelling and emotionally engaging media, this is the sort of stuff that we know helps people make an emotional connection to something and then hopefully encourage them to take action, be it setting up a new protected area, being it extending a protected area, or changing the legal status of a protected area so that it becomes a true protected area with no take and better management and reduction in poaching and everything else. And what we're headed towards is to have basically a dashboard for the planet. Because now, once you are continually monitoring every protected area in the world and doing it in a way that is totally open and transparent and is available and shared with everybody in the world, so that everybody, the citizen on the street, the policymaker in a government, the key person at an NGO, or the philanthropist who's making decisions about their own protected areas and the areas that they might wish to protect. They have their continually updated dashboard, but all of those things feed into this overall picture of what's happening in the world. And you might hope that this thing has sort of already been created. And the fact is, some developing world countries have technology like this. And the fact is, in the last few years, Wall Street is paying a lot of money to have this technology. And in the information, it's a terrible term, but in the information arms race between countries and private industry, there's a pressing need, in my opinion, for tools that bring everybody onto the same page. So anyway, this is all sneak peek, and thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning. Let's bring the energy up a little bit. Thank you for having me. Julia, thank you for inviting us to speak. Thank you for inviting me to tell our story. My name is Stefan Nicolo. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Full Cycle. I'm not a bullet point guy, so instead I like to have these images of planet Earth behind me when I speak. It reminds us of the beauty on this planet. It reminds me of what we're fighting for, what's important. This conversation about innovation can get very technical. And I thought I'd actually take it a different direction because it's really important that we, this community of doers and funders and operators, get on the same page about what it means to innovate. in this very short period of time in which we have to do it. And I'm going to say something maybe a little controversial, but innovation for innovation's sake isn't going to help us. The plastic straw revolution isn't going to get us out of this mess. Sorry. It'll help. It'll bring awareness. It's important to reduce waste, but the innovation that we've got to bring to bear must be on a massive scale. It must be in infrastructure and technology that could be widely adopted and brought all around the world, globally, and now. So at Full Cycle, we're a different kind of investment firm. We invest in technology that is climate critical and market ready, and sits in that nexus so that when we find tech, we find the operators that are the winners in a space, we can deluge them with resources, capital, funding, and put all that infrastructure in play now. So we have an internal slogan that says, now is better than new. So I'll submit to you two examples that I think point to this pretty clearly. The first is in 2009, Google X decided it was going to get into autonomous driving, autonomous vehicles, 2009. And Google, with all of its resources, put a lot of capital to work in this space, research and development. And then Uber came in. And then GE and GM and Daimler, Apple, even though they'll deny it. By a show of hands, who came here today in 2019 in an autonomous vehicle? There's always one, there's one. The reality is venture timelines are too long, and we don't have that kind of time to develop technology that will save us with a 12-year time window. And that 12-year time window is generous, right? It's a little icing, a little sugar coating on that one. So for us, the idea is to go into technology that can go into scalability now and to bring it to market as soon as possible. The other example I'll point to is about what it means to innovate where there is existing infrastructure, as Brent mentioned, and where there's opportunity to incrementally increase efficiency and scalability in existing science. So in that same year, in 2009, we thought, the global community thought, that the country of India would triple its use of coal by 2019. Triple. And people were really concerned about this. I mean, this is the second largest, most populous country in the world, tremendous economy, 3 times the use of coal would be devastating for our environment. But along the way, something started to happen in solar. And the incremental increases in efficiency and the incremental decreases in cost made it viable for solar to be adopted en masse in a country like India. And today, India has 40% more capacity from renewables than it does from coal. So the example there shows that if we deploy resources intelligently and with intention towards existing science that can scale and can be made more efficient, we can actually make a dent now, not later. And so that's a really important principle for us to keep at heart. And I want to make sure everyone's on the same page about that, because where we deploy our resources in 12 years is going to matter. We can no longer spray and pray and hope that one of the things works. We've got to get very, very directive and intentional about where we deploy resources. Which brings me to my second point, which is right now, the global funding community, so every government, every DFI, every funder, every private institution is putting about $350 to $400 billion to work in energy infrastructure, renewable energy infrastructure. And we know now that that number that needs to be put to work to meaningfully make a dent and divert us from 2C to 1.5C is about 1.5 trillion. So we are way short. And even if we have an increase in those resources, we're still going to come up short. So someone yesterday said to me that In technology and infrastructure, it is an all hands on deck play. And I thought about that for a second. It just doesn't feel right. I like this one. It just doesn't feel right. It's not all hands on deck. We are the hands on deck. It's more hands on deck, right? It's new hands on deck. It's a bigger deck. It's a deeper ship. It's more ships. That has to be our principle at heart if we're going to meaningfully put into play infrastructure that can actually impact climate. And so the second piece that people don't often talk about is financial innovation. What is it going to mean to deploy $2.5 trillion every year, compounding through 2050 to make a difference on a global scale? It's going to mean new financial products. It's got to mean new financing vehicles. It's got to be new counterparties at play. And it's got to mean entities that are existing in this space to diverting those resources in a way that's meaningful and at scale. And so for us at Full Cycle, our first investment is in waste to energy. And this is not a new space, but the company in which we're invested, Sonova, has just that bit of incremental technology that permits us to say, well, we can scale this tech globally. We just need to deploy billions of dollars to do it. So that's what we're doing. And to do that, we need a platform in which you and you and you and you and you can meaningfully participate in the ownership and the economic incentives that exist in owning those assets. What I mean by that is, if we're going to increase and broaden the number of people and the base of people and entities that participate economically in the solutions that will solve for climate change, it has to be economically viable. It has to be fruitful. We live in an economy. People are financially incentivized to participate. That's the idea behind what we're up to, and that's the principle at heart when we think about innovation. It's that we need to make sure that everyone can participate in the solutions that will save us, and that the solutions that will save us are those that are prioritized in a way that we're being intentional about. In other words, let's put a list together of where we want to attack first, where we can have the most meaningful impact. Paul Hawking's work at Drawdown is so impactful in this way because it gives us a roadmap. Whether or not you agree with the ordering and the listing doesn't matter. What it shows us is that you can make business plans and business models around the kind of technology that exists that will meaningfully sequester and abate enough carbon to change us and change our trajectory. So I'll leave you with this. Yesterday, Paul said that we are currently living in a world that no other human or no humans have ever lived in before. That slapped me in the face. I was like, wait a minute, that's right. And you can look at that one of two ways, right? Even if you're being pragmatic about it, that can be pretty terrifying. We don't really know what's to come. I choose to look at it the other way, actually. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity at hand in this new world, right? We have an opportunity to rebuild the systems and make obsolete the 19th and 20th century infrastructure that, while it may have done very well for us to get us to this place, is no longer serving us, right? And that's really the opportunity here. And that's why innovation, framed correctly and mutually understood, collectively understood, is so important. We're so happy to be here and have this conversation to spark it, and we're thankful to have the stage to do it. And we hope that everyone here will take that at heart and see what it will look like to participate in the solutions that will help us. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. Stefan, I'm going to start with you.
All right.
With climate change being one of the top threats to our health, economy, and the planet, you speak with so much passion. Can you give a brief description of what inspired you to pursue this portion of this work?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the kind of the existential answer, right? think everyone reaches a point in their lives where they say, well, what's the legacy that we're going to leave behind? And I frame it to say, when they look back 40 years from now at this room, what will they say we accomplished and tried to accomplish in facing this existential threat? Right? Did we waste time arguing whether or not climate change is real? Or did we actually just get to work chipping away at this problem that was coming for all of us?
Right.
And I've got a Wall Street background. I've managed a lot of money. I've been an investor for 10 years. My partner, Ibrahim Al-Husseini, who's the founder of Full Cycle, has been a climate investor for 20 years. And in the conversations that we have, it really is about thinking how we can bring this body of expertise to something that we're really passionate about, really braiding together passion and what we're good at.
Right. I was very inspired when you said 12 years. We're actually working on some of our marketing materials for Earth Day and talking about the fact that we have 12 Earth Days left, right? So we can't wait 12.
Yeah.
We have to do something
Absolutely.
every day.
Absolutely.
So very good. Thank you so much. Steve, Americans are starting to take notice of the immediacy of the problem. We see this in evidence quite frequently. How do you plan to use your data and visualizations to draw them in? How are you going to give them access to it? Or are you going to do it through business opportunities, meaning businesses?
Right. So National Geographic is, most people think of it as the magazine with the yellow border and, and all the photography and everything else, right? And the maps, the fold-out maps that are in the things, right? And that's all great, and National Geographic has had lots of stories about environment and stuff like this. So National Geographic Society, which is the exploration society that created the magazine to fund the expeditions, essentially. Our strategy is that, as Stefan was just saying, the need is now, right? So, and there are so many organizations who are focused on mobilizing the global public and informing and then hopefully mobilizing the global public, that's great. But there are decisions that need to be made now. And the strategy for doing that is that there are plenty of very forward-leaning, very entrepreneurial folks who have made fantastic investments in conservation areas around the world. National Geographic Society has a number of really close partners who've worked on these things. Chris Tompkins from Tompkins Conservation and African Park Networks and Gorongosa Park in Mozambique, which just got hit with the huge hurricane. Those parks and the other last wild places that we're trying to put in place to preserve the best of the remaining pristine wilderness, they need tools now. Just like you say, we need to convince people now. We need to show people now how much value is in these things. And so our strategy is to go to those senior decision makers now and give them the tools that they need to show off what they've got, or to have data-driven decision-making about what should they protect next.
Right.
And then but then provide them with the sort of narrative material that they need to explain to their stakeholders the decisions that they're making. Because everybody does like a good story. So having that emotionally engaging storytelling as well helps you make a decision, but also helps you explain to others why you made the decision that you did.
Right. Data visualization is so powerful. So thank you for your work in that area. Brent, obviously blue carbon is considered by many to be new technology. What other things do you see on the horizon or ways that you want to expand the use of it?
Well, the reason I like to talk about the numbers is I think we need to understand that we're talking about mitigating tens of gigatons a year, not thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions or even hundreds of millions or even 1 gigaton. We're talking tens of gigatons year after year. We need the money to pay for it. We need the political will and all that. And that isn't happening at all. Nowhere. The world governments have spent billions of dollars with the oil industry trying to capture CO2 and purify it and liquefy it and inject it underground. And they haven't even got to 5 million. Remember, there's 1,000 millions in 1 gigaton. And so you can take all the efforts of all the governments in the world and all the carbon capture projects And they don't even show up above the noise in what we're doing. And they're bigger than most of the things we're talking about here. See, and that's why I'm focused on the concrete industry. It's the largest mass material movement on the planet. Other than water, nothing moves more than rock. There's more rock. And it's already been paid for. The money's there, the infrastructure's there, and all governments need is to use their procurement power. So it's not even going to cost trillions of dollars. It's going to cost nothing. It's in fact going to save money because you're not transporting rock as far and that kind of thing.
Right.
So, sort of to what Stefan was saying, we need to be more selective about where we're going to put our resources, because if we spread it out, we're not going to get anything done that's significant, and it has to be in the billions. It can't be in the millions or hundreds of millions. It has to be in the billions.
Right.
And that's where I see it going, as I see the global infrastructure in place already to implement utilizing this vehicle of concrete, which is already happening, which is the most used building material, to mitigate permanently carbon profitably.
Right.
Without spending any more money.
Yes, very good. So Julia, thank you so much for bringing us all here together. I'll ask each of you very quickly for one last question. Tomorrow, what would you ask each of us to do coming out of the energy surrounded by this summit? Would you like to start?
Talk to your elected official, your regulators, about thinking about procuring low carbon products and all the money they spent, like the AB 262 here in California, the Buy Green bill.
Very good.
That's the one thing. Get in the federal highway bill. Get in whatever country you're from. Get the Department of Transportation specifying green materials. That's where the big volumes are.
Yep, very good. Steve?
So our call to action is, if there are folks who have protected areas that they're either setting up themselves or thinking about setting up, right? We would love to hear from you, because this product is, this Earth Pulse is still at the development stage where we want to hear the most important questions that you are dealing with. What are the biggest problems or the biggest key indicators that you're being asked for? Now we've talked to a bunch of folks already and we have some ideas, but the more folks we can talk to, the more we can make sure that this will be a platform that will really help people solve the problems that they have in promoting, in explaining and promoting the value of the protected areas that they're setting up and managing.
Wonderful. Stefan?
The self-serving answer is invest in full cycle. but the reality is, honestly, get active in this space in whatever way feels right to you. So you may not have $1 million, but maybe you have 1 million Twitter followers. Start getting intentional about using your voice about this issue. It's the most important thing that we're facing today. Mm-hmm. And so really understand your power and start to use it towards something that really matters. And I can't think of anything else that matters more.
Very good. Thank you all so much for coming today to share your stories. We appreciate it. We're going to save a bit of time, and we will not have a formal QA session from the audience, but we will all be around all day, and as you can see, we love to talk. So please approach us with your questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's here for Jody and her amazing panel. We thank you guys so very, very much. So everybody, we are going to stretch your legs and take a little break. We invite you to venture to the core. We'll see you back here for 10:45, but go and meet the Grounded Summit partners. Mingle, have great conversations. Our next session will start promptly at 10:45. So if you could start to make your way back here at about 10:40, our next session at 10:45. We thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Grounded Summit, our next series now commencing. Please come in, everybody. Please be seated. We're going to start this one promptly right now. I hope you had a chance to visit the core, meet some of our vendors. This next session will take us right into our lunch. Another inspiring, mindful, thoughtful lunch we'll enjoy from the team of 506 Food, our partner for the conference. All right, everybody, here we go. Our next panel, the focus for this next one, everybody, is ocean health and plastics innovation. If we can ask everyone to please be seated, we have to start promptly. Thank you so very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed panel comprises Jim Barry, Emma Riley, Valerie Craig, Shipley Chotre, and our moderator is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. She's a problem solver. The bigger the problem, the better. Life's wicked problems. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the panel and our moderator, Daniela Rousseau.
Good morning, everyone. Let's get ready for a talk about wicked problems and the people who solve them. First of all, very many thanks to our gracious hostess, Julia. Her vision has allowed for a very important space in this panel, a discussion on the health of our ocean and what do we need to do to maintain and preserve the blue heart of the planet. A good friend of mine always tells me, remember the emotion. So in the spirit of kicking off this panel, what I wanted to do is share some verses with you by Pablo Neruda. It's called The Sea. I need the sea because it teaches me. I don't know if I learn music or awareness, if it's a single wave or its vast existence, or only its harsh voice or its shining suggestion of fishes and ships. The fact is that until I fall asleep, in some magnetic way, I move in the university of the waves. It is not simply the shells crunched as if some shivering planet were giving signs of its gradual death. No, I reconstruct the day out of a fragment, the stalactite from a sliver of salt, and the great God out of a spoonful. What it taught me before, I keep. It's air caught ceaseless wind, water, and sand. The sea. Jim.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for caring. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about what goes on in the ocean related to CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. But before I kind of get into the details of that, to set the stage, I'd like to just briefly touch on some of the ecosystem services that we depend upon for our very lives. And certainly climate stability, the heat sink of the ocean, is the most important factor, that we wouldn't be here without that heat sink. Water is purified by the ocean for us and delivers it as rainfall in the mountains. Every other breath we breathe is oxygen produced by marine phytoplankton, so about half the oxygen on Earth is produced. Biodiversity, in addition to fisheries resources, we depend upon biodiversity for all sorts of things. It's a biological storehouse for potential compounds that can be important for pharmaceuticals, for material science, and that repository is something we exploit heavily. Food is the most obvious. We depend upon roughly 10% of the protein on Earth that we consume is produced by ocean resources, shoreline protection, coral reefs, mangrove swamps. All of these things are key for us. But what happens when we change the atmosphere, and how does the ocean respond? Well, really 4 things happen. Global warming that we've heard about a lot, ocean acidification, which is a change in the carbonate chemistry of the ocean, deoxygenation of the deeper waters of the ocean, reduced oxygen levels, and obviously sea level rise as both the water expands and glaciers melt. Now, one other thing I want to mention is plastics. We're going to hear a lot more about plastics today, and even plastics can contribute to these emissions. There's a recent paper by Sarah Royer and other colleagues at the University of Hawaii showing that as plastics degrade, some of them can emit methane, ethylene, and other greenhouse active gases. Now, you've seen some of the data, that little table there that shows us in 1850 we were at about 250 parts per million, or 280 parts per million, and now we're at 412. I got the same number that Paul Hawken did. I checked the site a couple days ago, and we're heading into an uncertain future that we need to consider very carefully. So, ocean warming. When you warm those surface layers, warm water is lighter than cold water. So that surface layer wants to float above that colder layer below it. And all of the oxygen that in the ocean enters through the surface, either through air-sea gas exchange or by the production of oxygen by marine plants and phytoplankton. And the deep waters of the ocean gain oxygen through the wind-driven and other mixing of waters from the surface down. When you warm that surface layer, wind blowing across the surface doesn't mix it as effectively. So over the last 30 years, all of the surveys of the deep waters of the ocean in every ocean basin that we've looked at show lower oxygen concentrations, and that's expanding. And that can be stressful for marine organisms at times, depending upon what their thresholds are for survival. Ocean acidification. I'm not going to go into the chemistry, the very brief chemistry you see there, other than saying that when CO2 reacts with water, rainfall, seawater, rivers, even our own within our cells, it is hydrated by water and forms carbonic acid that we all know as soda pop. And then that has some important changes that affect marine organisms, especially changes in the acidity of the ocean, with a more acidic ocean as we move into the future, as well as a reduction in some of the mineral levels that are important to make calcium carbonate shells and skeletons. And that doesn't mean they can't make them anymore, but it may mean that it's more energetically expensive for them, or that it'll actually begin to dissolve some of the calcium carbonate that's existing. Now, so global warming is happening, obviously, and we've heard a lot about this. This is just a projection with a couple scenarios, one of them moving up into the future with the red lines, and that's kind of the trajectory we are on, and we would love to stabilize. We've heard a lot about the ongoing consequences of what we see as climate change consequences. And although they're incredibly important, and we've seen this devastations that's occurred in some areas, if you look at the baseline, we're at 2019 here on this graph. We have just left the baseline, and depending upon how we treat our emissions, we're going to head up into a very different world, or hopefully stabilized. But what we've seen now is just a prelude to something that could be far worse. So action obviously is required. Now, ocean acidification. This top graph is the same graph that Paul Hawkins showed, showing the ice core data from Antarctica or Greenland or both. And those are CO2 concentrations rising and falling. The blue areas show us where we've had ice ages. And then we have this step into the future where we're moving up to an area where we haven't seen before. If you take those same data, and we've done some calculations just to measure ocean acidity, how will ocean acidity in the surface ocean change along those lines? And we see basically the reverse. As we emit more CO2, we get more carbonic acid. We'll see a change into the future that's shown in the context of this 400,000-year ice core record, but I could show you more data that go back 25 million years that show that this is just basically like stepping off a cliff into a new ocean chemistry that has not been present for at least 25 million years. One more little tidbit about that is that if you look at the rate that we're changing it and the magnitude, some ocean chemists think that this may be the biggest, most rapid change in environmental change in the ocean in up to 250 million years. So this is a huge event. So what do you do? And there are lots of options, really 4 options for organisms that are faced with any sort of environmental change. You can migrate if you're a fish, or your population can move to another location where the conditions may be more habitable. We see this a lot. Some of my research, a lot of research over the world has shown that there's been a redistribution of species, a shifting of fisheries, especially in the North Sea toward the north. Atlantic cod are moving north, and Arctic cod are being pressed up further north, but they can't go very far because they already live all the way to the pole. And this reshuffling of the distribution of organisms might have unforeseen or really poorly understood changes for the function of those ecosystems. Acclimation. We can adjust to some extent to new conditions, and some part of the population of all organisms may be able to tolerate those new conditions. If that tolerance is heritable, through evolution, you might see adaptation. And so we hope that some of the species out here are going to be able to adapt both fast enough and far enough to match the pace of environmental change that we're pressing. And the final option there is usually what happens, extinction. And if you look at Earth history, and at the very last slide, if I have time, I'll show a bit of Earth history showing that all of these mass extinctions that we've seen over Earth history have been driven by, or at least associated with, environmental change. So what happens in the world? We have about 1 in 3 people depend on the oceans for food in one way or another. For 500 million people, they depend solely on the ocean for their livelihoods, and maybe 30 million in the Coral Triangle depend upon fish from the reefs in front of them. What's happening to reefs across the world? Well, if you plot coral reefs this is what we see. That's where existing reefs occur. And if you just take those that have been bleached up to 2012, this is the consequence of those options that we've talked about. The corals that you see in red here, the dots you see in red, are areas that have been bleached. And we have lost 20%, 30% of reefs across the world already. In Earth history, we see that during mass extinction events, we lose coral reefs. And they come back in about 1,000,000 years, 100,000 to 1,000,000 years. So the Earth will recover, no problem, but it's the quality of life for us that we have to worry about. So we try to figure out how different organisms might respond to more CO2, warming, whatever it is. But what we really need to maintain the ecosystem services we depend upon are healthy marine food webs. You can see the green, all these lines are connections between these food webs, but the green line is basically running from primary producers, the grasses of the ocean, the phytoplankton. That energy has to be transformed through the food web into the things that we really care about on the right. Fisheries, tourism, ecotourism, whales, birds. That's what we want to make sure we maintain. Not so many people care about the middle, but they are critical. And here's one example. Sea butterflies, like Limacina, is an animal that lives off our coast. It's a marine snail that has a shell. It lives in midwater, floats around. It can be more than 90% of the diets of some salmon. We also know that right now, off the coast of California and further north, because waters are becoming more corrosive, the shells of these organisms are beginning to melt right now in the wild, not in a lab. So what happens if we move to the future and we see that we've lost marine pteropods? Will there be another species of small or large zooplankton that will have an equivalent ecological role, basically coming in as a sub when somebody's injured? Maybe that's fine. And then we can continue to have this flow of energy through the food web. But what if we start to change things enough that we knock out whole guilds within this food web? How does energy then move to one organism that's poised, that's there doing just fine because it's consuming phytoplankton, but the squid, it's too small for the squid. There's a break in the food web, break in that chain. And then the one thing we know is that if everything goes to hell, the microbes will win. So the slime always wins one way or another. But the concern is that we need to make sure we don't go too far in terms of environmental change to disrupt whole ecosystems. Now, just to finish up, we've got just like this fish that's going, what should I do here? We have the same conundrum. What should we do? And I don't think we know what we need to do. We need to reduce carbon and stabilize the climate. And we have lots of options that we've heard about today and yesterday that we need to, what everyone said already, we need to move forward and start in implementing these on large scales. Now, the last slide in the lower right there, you can see the 600 million year history of the fossil record on Earth. And don't worry about the colors, but the rise is the rise in the number of marine families, groups of organisms that live in the ocean. And you can see it rises up, and then those pink lines show us the 5 major mass extinctions on Earth, each of which was associated with some massive environmental change, usually volcanism. The biggest was the 250 million years ago, the Permian-Triassic boundary, where about 90% of life on Earth died. And that was associated with massive volcanism off Siberia that went on for 100,000 or more years, raised CO2 levels very high in the atmosphere, and led to extinction. We timed it right. We live in a period of relatively very stable climate. So no big deal. We're living in the good times, and we have to make sure that we don't allow the perturbations in climate to be so severe that we really lose the species that we have that we'll have to depend upon for the next, I don't know, the rest of our lives certainly, and hopefully humans will be around. We have also heard about the Anthropocene and how we're undergoing the 6th major mass extinction. That's not really related to climate change. That's more related to habitat loss, overharvesting, and other things that we're doing that are sort of an assault on the biota of the Earth. We don't want to add climate change as another driver of an extinction period. Let's make sure we start to implement these options. And I'll stop there and we'll move to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next?
You don't need it, right?
Thank you. I don't know about everybody else in this room, but when I see that slide, the corals, the red dots, It's really emotional. It's a really good visualization of the effect. It's hard, right, if you haven't been diving to really understand what's going on. And the world is so big, and we're very lucky if we get to spend some time on various continents, but most people don't. So I thank you for that, because it's a good visualization. My name's Emma Riley. I run strategic partnerships, marketing, creative for an organization called Sea Legacy, which was founded by Paul Nicklin and Christina Mittermeier, two really brilliant content capturers and creators. And I feel very grateful to be here. Thank you, Julia. We've known each other for a few years, and I'm really inspired by your putting this together. I recently relocated to the Bay Area from New York, and it was really hard to breathe for a while this past fall. Literally. For about 2 weeks, wasn't it? Yeah. We were 2.5 hours away in Oakland, which is where I live. And there were moments where it just felt like we were a part of the apocalypse. Every other breath we take is coming from our ocean. So even in moments in which we feel like we're part of a situation that cannot be solved, and we're having trouble breathing, every other breath we're taking is coming from that which is working, which is at risk of no longer working in the ocean. So how do you talk about that? How do you get that to an audience? How do you engage an audience in a way in which they don't necessarily need to shift their lives to feel as though they're a part of the solution? How many people in here watch movies? How many people in here go online? How many people in here have a cell phone? So how do you use the power of content to pull in an audience and not only expose and educate them to the fact that every other breath we take is due to our ocean, but inspire change, inspire action? We at Sea Legacy have an audience that reaches we reach 25 million people, that is our audience, on a daily basis. We pull those people in, and we do not say to them, give us money, we need you to be a part of work that we're producing, we're changing, we're teeing up. We say to them, join us. Join us, witness what we're witnessing, and then go to this organization or go to that organization. Sign up for this moment of change. Support this work. Be a part of producing this marine protected area. We see our power as creators, as creatives, as marketers, as advertisers, as a power that can inspire others to work with local communities, local efforts, and help support movements that otherwise would not move as quickly as they are. Collaboration is key to success. Collaboration is key to us all coming together. We would not all be here if Julia had not recognized that a way to speak to the effort was through pulling a handful of people together who are not necessarily speaking on the same issues and are not necessarily speaking to the fires directly, but are ultimately speaking to the same issue. We're ultimately here for the same reason. At Sea Legacy, again, we recognize that. And so we do not use our content that Paul pulls from the Arctic or that Christina pulls from the South Pacific, to generate action that we produce within our network, but rather we use it to further action developed by other networks. I'm going to show 2 videos. They're far more interesting than my standing up here and talking to you. The first is from a campaign we produced called Death Nets. Paul personally witnessed the devastation that was happening across the thin blue line here in California. And again, recognizing that we needed our global audience of 25 million we reach on a daily basis to support that effort, we thought as a team, let's get out there. Let's actually shoot and provide to those with cell phones, to those that watch films, to those that absorb content, what's happening to then push them away from us to another community and hopefully create some real change. So, my friend, if you could please play the Death Nets video, that would be wonderful. So you saw 12 days, signatures that would otherwise not have been collected. We recognize the power of collaboration. We recognize the power of content. And we recognize the power of pushing your audience to another network in order to inspire change in a much broader community. A second very short video that I'd like to show is a video of something that's going on right now in Norway. And it's something that we really need an entire community to become a part of through our network, again, which is a much broader network at its core. So if we could show the second video now, that'd be great.
The ocean now is just booming with life. It's totally unique in a world. Where would you find anything like this that as concentrated as it is here? I think that Lofoten kind of represents for Norwegian the image of Norwegian nature and how our culture is, because it has everything. Everything from the fjords to the big oceans to the mountains.
Most importantly, it's been the fishing breadbasket of Norway for thousands of years. In the 50s, 60s, and especially the 70s here in Norway, the herring catch went down. The catches were just smaller and smaller to the point where it was collapsing. When that happens, everybody looks around for somebody to blame. And I think it came very natural to blame killer whales. Whalers went out and hunted killer whales. And the last 10 years before it was stopped, more than 700 killer whales were killed.
Since then, killer whales became protected. Quotas were in place for the herring fishery. Herring actually recovered, and killer whales have recovered too. This is probably the strongest and healthiest population of killer whales in the world.
We also have herring fishermen who are quite into the killer whales. You've seen fishermen posting pictures and video, and they're excited about it. I think the transition has mainly happened because a lot of people also from the outside have started coming in and saying, I have never seen anything like this. Your country is amazing. Your natural wonders are unparalleled.
There's a huge local pride that people come from all over the world to see what is here in northern Norway.
So then to risk all of that for oil, it's just beyond me that anyone could even imagine doing that. We've had this debate like every second year, every fourth year, because our politicians have never been brave enough to say no to the oil, permanently no. So yeah, so we've won it 6 times, and still they're not giving up. But we can't have it that way, that we wait for every fourth year that insecurity comes back to us every time.
So we're here to try to appeal to Norwegians, to the government of Norway, to leave the oil in the ground and let this place be.
It's time now to say that it's permanent protection so that we know and nothing will happen when we get a new government. That can give safety to the fishermen up there, and it can give safety to the people that's what will happen to this area.
If Norway manages to say, yes, we have a lot of oil in these fjords, but we know that we need to transition to renewable energy and we're going to leave that oil in the ground, I'm hoping that countries like Canada will follow suit. Just because you have a lot of oil doesn't mean you have to take it out of the ground. Today, our planet needs climate action, and part of that climate action is leaving that oil where it is and transitioning to a renewable energy future, quickly.
The public has been the clearest in wanting to protect this area, while the politicians, they are hesitant. We have to make sure that we give them the courage to take this brave decision and protect one of the world's most unique marine areas.
These pristine gems, these pristine refuges, these pristine sanctuaries that want to thrive, just let them thrive and celebrate it and realize how special they are.
Norway wants to be a leader in ocean conservation. They want to be a leader in climate change. And so in their own backyard, they have the best opportunity to create a shining beacon of hope for the world.
Wrap up very quickly. How many people here live in Norway? No one. One person. Well, the rest of you don't need to help support the movement that's taking place by joining our global audience of 25 million, if not more, that we reach on a daily basis and participating in the change. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so from beauty to less than beautiful. The next 5 minutes are going to be a little bit depressing, but I promise that in the Q&A we're going to focus on the hope and solutions. So I'm here today to set the context for plastic pollution. It's an interesting problem because it's one that's global, it's visible, we know it's harmful, but it's also solvable. Plastic is a miracle material that has become an environmental scourge. So this map shows a ton of information, but the bottom line is pretty bleak. At this point, plastic waste has been found from the Arctic to the Antarctic and from the surface to the sea floor. About 40% of the plastic we use today is used just once and then tossed. And that chain from production to purchase through to disposal offers lots of opportunities for leakage. About 9 million tons of plastic is getting to the ocean every year. So it's a huge number. Think about 5 plastic grocery bags full of plastic trash for every 1 foot of coastline. Still hard to envision. Okay, picture 5 plastic grocery bags sitting on your own lap right now. And to your right and your left,
Your neighbors have those same giant piles sitting on their laps. Now extend that chain around every coastline of the world. You start to get the picture. It's a huge amount of waste. And when you think about that waste making its way out to the ocean, and we have one global ocean with currents that can carry waste from one shoreline around the world, you start to get a picture for the kind of crisis we're getting into. But the question is, how did we get into this mess in the first place? So back in the mid-1800s, plastics, the very first developed from plants as celluloid, were produced to become an alternate material to things that were expensive and frankly grossly unsustainable, like ivory. So it was a great, cheap alternative. Things like combs and billiard balls and piano keys suddenly were able to be produced without killing hundreds of thousands of elephants along the way. But in just a couple short decades, we figured out how to make plastic from petroleum, and that produced a massive leap in technology. In 1955, Life magazine had this amazing picture of an American family celebrating the dawn of throwaway living. These disposable plastics were going to free the modern housewife from the burden of dishes. And as we all know, this has been, to say the least, a mixed blessing. Yes, these plastics have brought huge convenience to our lives, but it's also these same disposable plastics are what represent the majority of waste that's getting out into the environment every year. So since 1950, we've seen an incredible growth. Can you head back one slide, please? While it may not have been the dawn of throwaway living, it certainly was the dawn of the plastics boom. And in the years since 1950, we've produced over 8 billion metric tons of plastic. And the incredible part of that is 50% of it is from just the last 15 years. And under our current trajectory, we're set to hit 34 billion metric tons by 2050. Most of that, about half of that, the biggest market, is for packaging materials. These are materials that are used for 6 months or less, and most of it isn't recycled. It's either landfilled, incinerated, or in the worst case, and what's happening more and more, is ending up leaked out into our environment. So with plastic only set to increase in the coming years, we've got to get a handle on this before it's too late. So one of the things that makes plastic incredible is also why it ends up in the environment. It's light. Its lightness means that it can travel on the wind and on the waves. But its lightness is also why plastics probably won't go away, and why we have to figure out better ways to make plastic and to deal with plastic. So imagine all of these bottles you see in this plastic made of glass. Imagine hundreds of thousands of glass bottles being shipped around the world, and the weight that represents, and then the difference in weight if those bottles are plastic. That weight difference equals carbon emissions. We can't ignore that if we're gonna live in a globalized society, we have to figure out how are we gonna move products around the world in a way that's gonna reach people who need access, but also isn't going to cause harm. So the problem with plastics is less about the plastic itself and more about that it's ending up where it doesn't belong, in places like the ocean, where it can break down over time and enter our food chain. The other problem with plastics is that once it gets out into the ocean, you sure as heck aren't going to be able to get it anymore, right? Once it's broken down into microplastics and is super small, the amount of cost, if it's even possible, is astronomical to try and collect it. So let's start focusing on preventing it from getting there in the first place. Let's look up into our rivers and up onto land and put in the prevention solutions to capture waste, to lessen the use of waste, to make sure that we're never allowing it to get out into the ocean in the first place. I promise I'll come back with some hope and solutions in discussion, but I'm going to hand it off to Shilpi to continue the conversation.
Hi, everybody. So great to be here. Thank you to Julia and the Grounded team for having me. I am Shilpi Chotre. I am the Senior Communications Officer for the Break Free from Plastic movement. We are a group of 1,400 organizations working all around the world at all points in the plastic pollution life cycle. So as Valerie teed up in her presentation, we know ocean plastic is a massive problem, but plastic pollutes at every stage of its life. from extraction to production to consumption to disposal. So our group and our movement is working for systemic change worldwide to get to the root cause of the problem. So we don't really focus on end-of-pipe measures like cleanup, because we cannot clean up ourselves out of this mess. What's also unique about our movement is that we do work at a global scale, and our colleagues in the US, in Europe, and Southeast Asia and China are working collaboratively at a peer-to-peer level. This is extremely important right now because, as you've seen in mainstream media, in certain plastics dialogues we're having, and even in the Trump administration, Southeast Asia is predominantly being blamed for the plastic problem. This is a huge concern for those of us in the movement that believe in human justice and social equity. It is corporations in the global north that are creating this problematic packaging to begin with, and then opening markets predatorily in areas of the world like Asia, Latin America, and Africa, knowing very well they don't have the infrastructure to manage this type of waste. It's simply unmanageable. Second, we have been shipping our waste overseas to China for decades. Only 9% of our waste in the US has been recycled since the 1950s. So let that sink in. The blue bin is not going to save the day. In January 1st of 2018, China decided that they would no longer take the world's waste. They were being treated like a dumping ground, which is really, really powerful. However, it's caused catastrophic ramifications in the global waste trade. We have waste in the US and Europe piling up in ports all over our countries and nations with nowhere for this waste to go. Secondly, because China is no longer taking the waste, it is now being diverted to other areas of Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, India, Thailand, Malaysia. So no one or other country should be bearing the brunt of this toxic industry. We need to figure out how to manage waste at the domestic level and figure out recycling here. Okay, I know that was a little heavy, so we'll get to some fun stuff now. As I mentioned in the opening slide, we don't focus on coastal cleanup, but we do focus on the brand audit. How many of you have participated in a coastal cleanup before? Wonderful. So it is a great way to raise awareness and get involved in your local community. What we're doing is asking folks to take their coastal cleanup to the next level by incorporating a brand audit. So we're not only looking at the types of plastic found in the waste stream, but the brands responsible for this waste to begin with. And we do this at the global level. This is a snapshot of our first ever global brand audit that was pioneered in September this year. 6 continents, 42 countries, 9,000 volunteers, and you'll see 187,851 pieces of plastic pollution that were categorized and cataloged. All of this information went into the same data set so we can create this report that we would use in corporate campaigning, in all of our communications, to influence policymakers. And here are the results of the report. I also want to mention, just a couple days ago, Coke disclosed that they use 3 million tons of plastic a year. I know that's hard to visualize, so let's picture a blue whale. Beautiful, massive animal. Now picture 15,000 of them. That is 3 million tons. So we are seeing a direct correlation with the branded trash that we're finding in our global cleanups and what corporations are putting out as they're reporting. So I only have a few seconds here. I wanted to talk about accountability and bring it back to the narrative around it's not consumers are to blame, it's corporations are to blame. Thank you. And I'll leave you with one startling statistic. Also, let's keep it as an opportunity. Plastic production is slated to increase by 40% in the next decade. We have to hold industry accountable and let them know we are imagining a different world and we know it's possible. I'd love to connect to stop plastic pollution, stop making plastic. That is essentially what our movement is all about.
So let's talk about solutions. I am Daniela Russo. I am the founder of Chief Executive Officer of Think Beyond Plastic, and we are an innovation accelerator. We met Julia at Davos at the World Economic Forum in January, and since then we've been on this path of discovery of what is needed to support innovation as a way of solving the problem of plastic pollution. At Think Beyond Plastic, we focus on the problems worth solving. We call them wicked problems. Wicked problems is a term well known from design language, but also in business. And they're characterized with problems that are difficult to solve due to the scale, to the incomplete or contradicting information, or changing data. Wicked problems affect large groups of people. Wicked problems are really resistant to solution. There is no determinable stopping point. And one solution typically creates another problem. Because what happens if we get rid of plastic? Plastic has a lot of really good uses. What happens if we start investing in recycling infrastructures? We're part of a big project right now to figure out what would it take to build recycling infrastructures in Southeast Asia. And I can tell you that the numbers are phenomenal to just build recycling enough to manage a little bit more of collection and management of this plastic waste. It's in the trillions. So these are wicked problems. This is a global wicked problem. Plastic pollution is a wicked problem. So because we're gluttons for punishment, we chose this to deal with. We're a group of innovators and entrepreneurs. I spent 30 years of my life in Silicon Valley, starting and running businesses, ran the starting bell on NASDAQ, took companies public. My business partner has a background in biotech. And so we look at the plastic pollution problem as an untapped innovation and investment opportunity. It's largely untapped. To us, these are not problems. They're solutions waiting to be addressed. Plastic has brought enormous benefits to society. It's brought enormous damages. And plastic as a material has inherent design flaws. Think about how we use it. This is a material that's been millions of years in the making, and we use it to throw stuff away. This is a material that we already know leaches the toxic chemicals and compounds that are used in its manufacture into the food and drink it contains, yet we use it to deliver food and drink. And this is a material that's very lightweight and prone to littering, yet we use it specifically for stuff that is to be taken away. And we use it in increasingly amounts in that way. So we took a step back as we examined the problem and said, perhaps there is another way to look at all this. Plastic, it has inherent design flaws. So what if we redesign that? This is my old presentation, by the way, you guys. So I'm sorry you put that in. But we look into the plastic pollution problem as a moonshot innovation opportunity. We call it the moonshot innovation opportunity because when we decided to go to the moon, it required mobilization on an unprecedented scale. It marshaled resources, it brought interdisciplinary collaboration, it required government support, it required investors, innovators, and entrepreneurs. It is nothing short than that. So we're looking into creating a generation of materials that are biobenign, not plastic in its current form, which is petroleum product, made, as I said, millions of years in the making, but biobenign materials that are sustainably grown, sustainably manufactured, and with a sustainable end of life. That could be agricultural waste. It could be materials that are derived by enzymatic pathways, but they're all biobenign. They can break down to their natural elements. That is not enough. We're looking into a new generation of chemistry, which is green chemistry, which will create the compounds that are currently used in plastics out of sustainable sources. So they're not endocrine disrupting chemicals. The flexibilizers and the paints and the colors, all of that stuff can be made out of sustainable materials. And last but not least, we're looking into a generation of product delivery that is based on a service model that is essential to the circular economy. We live in the age of a gig economy, so we're all about services. So why do we still deliver products in the same essential way of putting stuff on the shelf in boxes with pretty packaging that then becomes waste? So we're looking into the circular economy for packaging and where the innovation opportunities are, and they are multiple. Our focus is on the left side where it's the red color. So we're looking into creating the new materials that will support the new chemistry, that will support all the associated innovations in that space. That space is largely underfunded right now. On the right-hand side, there are millions of dollars in commitment to sorting, recycling, transportation that is already well understood, and industry would love to support that because it does not in any way threaten their business model. So the message there is keep making plastic, keep throwing away, we can recycle and collect it. It's not possible. So what is needed really is a level of innovation that will be upstream innovation, that will bring the new materials, the new product delivery models, and we need to support that kind of innovation. It requires an innovation ecosystem. Everybody is a participant there. What Shilpi and Valerie talked about is demand creation on unprecedented scale for new products, new materials, everything new. So that's the demand creation piece. The innovators will rise to the occasion. The entrepreneurs will bring these companies to the fore. And investors such as Full Cycle and others will support that and invest funding to make that happen. So we've created the Catalytic Innovation Fund. The biggest problem the innovators are facing today with regards to investment is that everybody wants to invest in a market-ready company. And of course, that's understood. That's the risk company that somebody has evaluated and helped transition through the valley of death. But the longest journey for these entrepreneurs is from the 50 grams of material with a patent pending in a university to creating a minimum viable prototype that industry might be interested in licensing. It's a long journey, it's a perilous journey, it's unnaturally long. It's not like the valley of death in any other industry, except perhaps in biotech. And it needs help and resources. Most of these companies die on the vine right there. So we look into supporting them with funding. We'll look also into, we've created an innovation infrastructure, which is essentially access to labs. Because these companies are heavy on science, they require access to lab equipment, which is rarely found outside of the academic environment. Some of our partners, industry partners, offer their labs, but if you're an innovator developing a new product, would you go and use the Dow Chemical lab? Probably not. Not the Unilever lab either. So it has to be a pre-competitive space where there could be these developments and access to equipment. Normally, government grants do not give you access to equipment or the ability to purchase that. So we've created an innovation infrastructure throughout Europe. This year, we're opening some innovation centers in Africa to support that. It's not possible without partners. And what is really important for me to share with you is we work with industry. In a weird dichotomy, industry is one of the biggest customers for these new products. So it's impossible to work without them. Trust me, Coca-Cola knows exactly what their customer problem is. All of the major consumer brands know what the problem is. They need to work towards anticipating the changing customer shift in behavior and needs and attitudes and be prepared for this. They know it very well. So we work with a whole group of mentors from these companies, teaching and training the entrepreneurs on what is needed, what are the price performance characteristics that are required, and how they need to develop a product for which they will become customers. I can talk more about this later, and if you want to see the flip-flops made of algae or some prototypes that are available right now, come and take a look at our booth. We also have an investor forum on June 11th, where we will bring in investors willing to participate and support these entrepreneurs with early stage innovation seed grants. So thank you. Thank you. So let me ask our panelists some questions. And then hopefully we will have enough time to open it for questions from you. Jim, I'll start with you because you went first. So you spent a good part of your life communicating science to the public and developing science for the purposes of changing some of the norms and policies, creating policy shifts. What is the greatest challenge for you in your work?
Well, I forgot to say at the outset that I'm one of the nerds that takes things into the lab and tortures them a little bit to see how they respond to future climate change. And for ecologists like myself, understanding how whole ecosystems are going to respond to environmental change is a very difficult thing to do. We have a very hard time doing an experiment, especially in the ocean, on whole ecosystems. What we do instead, when we started learning about ocean acidification, warming, is to literally put organisms in jars, change those conditions, and see how they respond. Physiologically, do they live, do they die, do they grow, do they change their acid-base balance? We need to scale up from those sorts of studies, which we're doing now, to multi-species studies, hopefully in real natural ecosystems, to understand how not just one factor is affecting the performance of organisms in ecosystems, but warming, acidification, deoxygenation, pollution, overfishing, all simultaneous potential stressors on these systems. And that's the hard thing to do. And the last hard thing to do is to figure out, will they be able to adapt? We know species adapt, but how fast they can adapt is unknown. Now, given that that's the hardest part of our job, that doesn't say we can't determine the course we should take because we don't have the answer yet. We know plenty to show that environmental change can kind of wreak havoc on ecosystems. We know what we need to do now in terms of managing climate. We do need to understand more to predict what sort of consequences we're going to see for fisheries, for coral reefs, and other things.
That's terrific. And Emma, could you chime in into that conversation? What is your greatest challenge? So clearly you have the attention of the public and you have large groups of people who are affected by your messages, but what do you feel is the greatest challenge in communicating these topics?
So I should say, my colleagues and I began an organization called Lonely Whale about 3.5 years ago in New York City. We have a strategic collaboration with Sea Legacy. So I'm here on behalf of Sea Legacy, but looking through the lens of both organizations, one of the difficulties that we face is championing the fact that we are communications campaigners. We do not claim, for example, that the single-use plastic straw and the effect that our campaign, Strawless Ocean, had on the world about 1.5 years ago is going to change the global plastics landscape. The single-use plastic straw, while used on average by everyone 2 times a day, regardless of your background, where you live, what religion you associate yourself with, et cetera, is a problem. We believe that through the campaign that we produced, pulling together a handful of other NGOs, of various forms of media, of various pop culture figures, Russell Wilson, et cetera, we could champion one object, the removal of it, broadening then the conversation about plastics, opening up our world, really, to the problem, right? People who didn't already know about it heard about the straw and its effects on the world's waterways in Omaha, Nebraska. Although they were nowhere near the ocean, they could then speak to the ocean because they could speak to that which they were using 2 times a day on a daily basis. Similarly, at Sea Legacy, we use content and sort of the ease of it. Everyone in here watches movies. Everyone in here has a cell phone to generate interest not only in our work, but in work that's happening in communities all over the world. So communications campaigning and the effectiveness of it in regards to generating further action is, I think, one of the challenges that we have. The effectiveness of it is great, and I hope that that's apparent.
So let's talk with Valerie and Shilpi now about identifying and encouraging innovation. Think Beyond Plastic has been doing this for the last 6 years. And one of our greatest challenges has always been motivating, bringing a wave of innovators, evaluating them. Every year, this is a big part of what we do before we determine who has a commercial viability and how we take them to market. Recently, you introduced National Geographic, kind of joined in that effort with a on a large-scale innovation challenge. Can you talk a little bit about that challenge, why you did that, and what you expect to come out of it?
Sure. At the high level, when we're looking at this plastics issue and the role of National Geographic, beyond the work that we can directly do in science and exploration and in education and in reaching the public, we saw that there are 2 key areas where there was going to be a lot of action globally required. One big one on waste management, and we need to figure out how to handle the giant load hitting the earth. And the other side on material innovation and on new business models, and we have to really change the way these products look and the chemistry of them, as you were laying out before. Yeah. And we thought about, again, what can we do as National Geographic? And we wanted to add to the innovation space. There have been a number of different innovation challenges, but we reach different audiences. And in our view, it's going to take people from different sectors to actually solve these problems, that people who are producing products that have nothing to do with plastic can bring a new way of thinking and might be able to crack the nut. So we launched this innovation challenge that's pursuing 3 different tracks. And definitely, please spread the word, because we're taking applications for it up until June. So we are focused in on materials design, and in particular around food packaging. We're looking at the things like chip bags and granola bar wrappers that are multi-layered plastics, and you can't do anything with it. Once you make a product out of a lot of different kinds of plastic, forget it. Recycling's not even on the table. So how can we create new materials that are going to package these products that are part of our daily lives? A second track is about circular economy and really getting to that piece that I think was just outside your red line, which is about looking at logistics and business models. So a great example are food boxes, right? Many people are now part of Blue Apron or any other company, and you get these giant boxes delivered to your house every week, and they have lots of teeny tiny little containers full of condiments and things, and all of those have to be thrown away. Why is that the case? Why can't it be the case that they are delivered in reusable packaging containers, and when you get your next box, they pick up the old one? It's not rocket science, right? It's just applying lessons learned from other industries to this particular problem. And then the last one quickly is about data visualization. So there is a lot of information out there about this problem, about other problems, but communicating a problem of such scale is really challenging, and communicating it in a way that's going to be actionable for policymakers, for heads of corporations, and for individuals is even a greater challenge. So we wanted to put a call out to designers, to the data nerds of the world, to say, give us your ideas, help us figure out how to share this, and we will lend you the platform of National Geographic to be able to share that to engage people around the world.
That's terrific. Thank you. And Shilpi, I have a question to you. Break Free from Plastics works worldwide, and you see innovation on every level, in communities, on a large scale. Can you talk about what excites you and what gives you the greatest hope?
Yes, I'd love to give 2 examples, one local and one global. So first, in Berkeley, California, we passed the most progressive disposable food dining ordinance for sit-down restaurants. So if you go anywhere in Berkeley starting 2020, if it's a sit-down restaurant, including McDonald's, you will be served with reusable materials. And not only that, if you do want to have takeout, you'll be charged a 25-cent fee. Those materials will either be a high percentage of recyclability, so we know it's not being shipped overseas, and compostable. The second example is zero waste innovation and solutions in Asia. So I have a video for you to see. And to tee it up, zero waste is defined by diversion of waste from the landfill. And some of the success rates we're seeing in Manila, Philippines with these zero waste models is they're saving up to 76% of waste through household segregation. And so instead of me talking about it, I'd love for you to hear from one of our Filipino activists, Froilan Gate. So if you want to tee up the video here, it's 4 minutes long.
Plastics are treated as a product that miraculously appears from nowhere, and it goes to nowhere. It starts when the oil and the gas leave the wellhead, and it keeps on being a problem at every stage along the way. Why is it that we're seeing so much more plastics entering the environment? This is the story of plastics.
If we see waste simply as an infrastructure issue, it will never work. In a zero waste system, it's always people-centered. We always work with the communities. We believe in the power of the communities to solve their own waste problem if only given the right support to actually do it. And that is why we began to work with cities in the Philippines. When we talk about zero waste cities, these are cities working towards zero waste. That is a goal. In a decentralized model, what we use are push carts, for example, and these allows us to go to each household and make sure that waste is collected at household level. The moment you provide waste pickers and waste collectors, the moment you provide a consistent schedule of collection with the right segregation bins, for example, all of our households comply, meaning the people want to do it. But the basic thing is, number one, we're ensuring that all waste are collected. Number two, that all organics are managed through composting on-site. The third thing is that we're able to recover as much recyclable waste as possible, as much paper, as much metal, as much plastic as possible. So the fourth point is that even in our zero waste models, they're able to reduce their waste by 7 to 8%, and still they're left with about 20 to 30% waste, residual waste, that they can neither compost nor recycle. But the beauty of a zero waste program is that we are not hiding these products. The zero waste program allows us to identify which products are beyond the capacity of communities to manage, which allows us then to engage the right people. In this case, corporations who are producing these products and packaging to either eliminate, redesign, or think of alternative delivery systems. Because if one community cannot manage it, one city cannot manage it, maybe the reality is that it's not manageable. The only way for us to address a specific product that is problematic is to not create it in the first place. We have tried to work with some corporations to address this problem, but what do they tell us? At this point, they're not made responsible for that. And that is what we want to change. That companies should stop that mindset that their responsibility ends when they sell it. They have to be responsible for the entire life cycle of the products that they produce. The solution cannot come from here, it has to come from the headquarters. These are typically in the US and in Europe. My vision for the future is all cities are going zero waste. After they've implemented the zero waste program, you can see the difference, you can smell the difference, you can feel the difference.
This was a film clip from The Story of Plastic, which is the first feature-length documentary unveiling the true cost of plastic pollution. The executive producer is my dear friend and colleague, Steve Wilson at the Story of Stuff project, and it will be released in just a few months. We are on our last leg of fundraising for distribution, so if you're interested in getting involved with this amazing project, please come find me.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our amazing panel. Daniela Russo, thank you so much, Daniela. And also thank you to Jim, to Emma, to Valerie, to Shipley and Daniela one more time. So, over lunch, everybody, you can ask questions of our panel. We're going to break for lunch. We'll be back here with our next session at 1:15. Please come back to the Dome at 1:10. You have an amazing lunch lined up in just a minute by Chef Soren Sepp. So please enjoy it. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, everybody. Please take your seats. Our afternoon sessions are about to start right now. How was lunch, everybody? Let's make a little noise for the chefs if you enjoyed the lunch. Come on, yes. Another party on our palates for lunch today. So, everybody, this next session or two is going to take us on an exploration of food and wine. First up, wine. I want to introduce to you another very special member of the Jackson family here with us today. In this next session, we're going to learn a little bit about how the wine industry is mitigating and adapting to climate change. So, ladies and gentlemen, to help us and to introduce us to a rock star winemaker, please put your hands together for Katie Jackson. Katie, coming up here.
I'm Katie Jackson. I'm Julia's sister. And before I introduce our next speaker, I wanted to say how appreciative we have of all of you for being here today to join the conversation around climate change resiliency and a better path forward for our world. And I'm so in awe of what Julia has been able to accomplish and just so impressed by this powerhouse group of individuals in the room today. So I really appreciate all of you. And on behalf of our entire family and everyone who works at Jackson Family Wines, we just feel so honored to be in this company of innovative and forward-thinking individuals, companies, scientists, advocates, and change makers. So thank you. Our family business, Jackson Family Wines, is a multi-generational family business, and because of that, we always think about the long-term health of our business, our communities, the lands that we farm, and also the environment that we impact as we make business decisions. And as a family that cares for the land, we feel a responsibility to the sites that we farm and the resources that we use, and making sure that they continue to be healthy for future generations. As our planet has become more and more impacted by climate change, we have felt compelled to move beyond just the local environment when we assess what we could do and look at a more global impact. And to that end, we've begun addressing our company's impact on the amount of carbon in our atmosphere and have begun talking about how we can reduce our carbon emissions significantly in the next 10 to 25 years. The most recent commitment we made is to partner with the Torres family in Spain. They're just an incredible winemaking family, and they came forward with an idea of making a working group of wineries around the world to commit to 80% decarbonization of their businesses by 2045 at the minimum. So that's something that we're really proud to be a part of as well. And for any wineries in the audience who would love to join us, we're looking for like-minded partners. So please come and talk to me about that after the panel. Our other greenhouse gas initiatives that we've taken since baselining our total greenhouse gas emissions in 2008 and making reduction targets include investing in renewable energy. So we've put in about 7.1 megawatts of solar so far over the course of the last 5 years. That makes us now the largest solar generator in the US wine industry, but we have a lot further we want to go. So we'd like to get to a 50% offset of our winery operations by 2021, and we're looking at an additional 5 megawatts by then, and we're on target. We've also targeted zero waste in our wineries and tasting rooms and have achieved a 98% diversion of waste from landfills in our wineries to date and are now looking at our tasting rooms. We've reduced the carbon emissions associated with the glass produced to make our bottles by lightweighting our bottles, and we still have a long way to go on that, but that's a significant opportunity for us. And then the last thing that I'm most excited about is that we've been investigating how we can use cover crops, compost, and different farming practices to do carbon farming and potentially sequester more carbon in our farms and the 60% of lands that we leave in their natural state than the emissions that we produce. We did an analysis last year, and it showed that if we had the right farming management practices, that would be possible. So in addition to reducing our emissions, there's also the possibility of inset, and that makes me very excited as a farmer about the possibility not only of us, but of the entire farming community to be able to be a part of the solution to climate change. And so I was very excited to see our renewable agriculture panel yesterday and hear Paul Hawken talking about this as well, and excited to do further research on that. But overall, we've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions intensity by 33% since we began tracking our progress in 2008, and we've got a long way to go to get better, but I'm proud of what we've been able to do so far. Now I'd like to introduce our next panelist, who we're so honored to have here today. She's a world-renowned expert and innovator in the wine space, and her name is Gaia. She comes from what is arguably the most well-respected and lauded wine company in Italy, and is certainly from one of the most respected wine families in the world. The Gaia family has been making wine for 5 generations, and Gaia is the 5th generation to be involved in the business and has taken the reins and is starting to look at how they could take their business to the next level. Gaia comes from a place of passion in everything she does and a genuine love of wine and the earth. Having grown up hearing her parents' discussions about the business and seeing how rewarding and creative their lives were because of it. She is unwilling to become complacent about the impact of her family's legacy, but instead is continuing her family's rich history of innovation by leading the way on many fronts. And since officially joining the business in 2004, she's been traveling the world as the winery's official international brand ambassador and has been involved in all aspects of the business, from grape growing to winemaking to various other business departments. The Gaia family has continued to innovate over the last 15 years by studying the impacts of climate change upon their vineyards and the ways to mitigate those impacts. It is our pleasure and honor to have her here today to discuss all the ways they are tackling those challenges, from looking at insect behavior, water availability, the time of ripening, and the changes to winemaking that must occur to take into account all of those things, as well as the cultural aspects of how their family is addressing climate change. And she'll be discussing the importance of policy as well, and the benefits of environmentally responsible farming. So it's our great honor to have Gaia here today. Please give me a hand in welcoming her to the stage.
So good afternoon, and thank you very much for this beautiful event and for inviting me. So my speech is going to be about climate change and the effect of climate change to wine. I come from Italy, and we own vineyards in Piemonte, in this area northwest of Italy. But we also have vineyards in Toscana. This is our vineyard in Piemonte. But we also have vineyards in Montalcino, in the heart of Toscana, and on the seaside of Toscana, in an area called Bolgheri. So if I look at the effect of climate change in Barolo and Barbaresco, in Montalcino, in Bolgheri, we can see the same effect in the 4 areas where we are. If we look back to the old vintages, if we think about Barolo and Barbaresco vintages from the 60s, or Burgundy or Bordeaux vintages, in the past, all the best vintages were the warm vintages. And so in the 60s, 1961 was a fantastic vintage, 64, 67. They were the 3 warmest vintages of the 60s. And if we look at the 70s, 1971, so 74, 78, or in the 80s, 82, 85, 88, 89, these were the best vintages, and they were always the warmest of the decades. Basically, they were the only vintages where there was enough sun to make the grape ripe. There were those vintages where it didn't rain so much during the summer and during the fall, so that the grapes could ripe healthy. And so we keep in mind this, and we always think that the warm vintages are the best, also for the warmest years are the best vintages for wine. And sometimes I travel around the world, and people, they tell me, I heard that in Italy you had a very warm summer, you had a very warm September, so you should be happy, probably you had a fantastic vintage. This was something of the past, but it's not happening today. Because it's true that in warm vintages grape ripe, but when you get to a stage where your summer is too hot and is too dry, then it's no longer good. Because when you have a summer that is too hot and dry, then your vines, they are dipped into a soil that is dry. And so the vines, they are not drinking anymore. And so they don't have energy to go forward in making the grape ripe. And meanwhile, you have a big sun that is bigger and bigger. You have a big concentrator that keeps burning the grapes. And so you start to have, in very warm vintages, you have grapes that they are like a steak, burn outside and green inside, with green tannins because the plant doesn't work. So at the same time, there are some good effects because we are getting warmer vintages. And so if you look at the last vintages that we had in Europe, there are more consistently good quality coming out every year. And this is also another effect of climate change. We get consistently warm summers, and so the grapes, they ripe. But it doesn't mean that climate change is giving us better